In today's episode, Kimmer cuts a hole in a perfectly good boat. He also manages to use left-handed scissors. And we went dog sledding.
I am so excited. This is awesome. Okay, so I've got the starter strip put on the deck here on both sides. Kind of see how I've got that kind of fit together. I chamfered these ends and glued them up so they're nice and tight. As we go down here, I had to staple this one twice because it just doesn't want to stay. If we look at that from the other side here, you can kind of see maybe that it just wants to open up a little bit. It doesn't want to stay tight, so I keep pushing that back down. Same on this one, I just have to keep pushing it back in. It wants to spring out a little bit, so it's kind of tough there. And you'll find that, and I had to, like a couple spots where I had to tape them down and just, hold them along the edges here because it wants to kind of spring out a little bit. This piece right here, I ended up having to put a shim underneath it because when I was building the hull, it didn't quite, it wasn't tight up to there. It wasn't pushed over enough. So it left a little gap right here. So I put a shim in here, another little shim here. I'll probably end up with one more before it catches up to that, but it's not going to be a big deal. You just kind of make it work. It's just wood, you bend it, you fit it, and you make it go. You can see over on this other side here, I've got a little bit of space right here too. I'm gonna have to do that same thing and tape that down just a little bit. Get that to sit tighter against there. So I'm at the point now where I've got the kayak stripped. This is the deck up to a certain point here. where I can get ready to figure out where this part goes. Now, this is they call it the combing that goes on around the cockpit. So as a part of the kit, you get this piece. They've got it all laminated and curved to the right shape and everything for you, so you can kind of see that. And when you're running these strips, you don't need to run them through here. In fact, you really, if I move this out of the way, you really can't. It's really tough to anyway, because these are flat, whereas you see the other ones are round. So if you'd be kind of up in the air through here if you came through there like that. So I just put this on here real quick, kind of marked around it. You can see right there, just put a mark there, get a mark down here, on here, and just at the front here. So that way, you kind of leave that space open. So just kind of let those just kind of run a little wild, into that area, just a little bit. You don't have to go more than like 4 or 5 inches, and just kind of leave an oval spot in there. And then that comes and gets cut out later. So at this point, gotten to the point where I am approaching this cockpit area, and I've started, shortening up the boards to leave that void there, basically. There's no reason to strip across that. And again, we can't really, it doesn't work. So doing shorter pieces. These are a little easier just because you're only having to taper one end, to fit in one end and not both ends at the same time. So you're not trying to make it exact. So that makes it a lot easier. Just kind of come up here, mark it, and then this last part just gets lopped off. So it works pretty well. Kind of show you too up at the end. It's not real nice because it's not sanded or anything yet, but I started out with just both pieces being mitered exactly the same, looking all the way down through here. But as I got into the third, fourth ones here, I started doing more of I don't know what you call it, a herringbone, skipping back and forth. And I kind of like the look of it. It turned out to be a ton easier to build it that way, but I think it looks cool too. I should also point out, I have totally abandoned at this point using those little clips. You remember I was using the clamps, little clips to hang on to all this stuff and keep it in place. Once you get up to this point, really, the tape is just working just fine. Like on the ends here where they want to kick up just a little bit, you just put a piece of wood on top of there and tape it down with some pressure. It just holds that joint together really nicely. But other than that, it's holding everything really nice and tight and working well, just because of the shape of the hull at this point. I also am not using any staples on the top. The only staples I've done so far are these right here where we're joining the hull to the top here, to the deck. I was not real happy with the way that those staples disappeared. Let's go underneath here and kind of have a look. I can get far enough away where you can see them. So when I was sanding those out earlier, before we put the urethane or the epoxy on there, all those little dots were gone. They disappeared. But once you put the epoxy in there, you can see how it darkens the lines. It darkens anything that's really been disrupted in the material at all. That big one at top was one of the nail holes. These other ones are the staples. So I wasn't real happy with that. I'm really glad I didn't have to do it on the sides too much, because on the bottom it's really not going to show too much, so it's not a big deal. But up here, I've been able to get away with just having them just holding those two pieces together just to hold the deck in place, basically. So I'm a lot happier with it that way. We are to the point now where all the pieces have been put on the deck that need to go there. Just left that opening where the cockpit holes are going to be. So if you're following along in the instructions here, we are now on number 29 out of 4006, I think. So when you get the kit, Joe sends you this big sheet of paper here too. It has templates for your hatches, front and back, and then also the cockpit recess cutout template. So that's what I'm going to cut out next, and hopefully we'll get that to work. Make a mark at 91.5 inches off the front of the boat. That's going to be the start of your opening. That center line may or may not line up with the pattern that you've got here. Depends on like where you started on this edge exactly here versus on the other side. So as those come together. So you may want to adjust just a little bit, not drastically, but enough to make it look balanced. So I've got the template laid out on here, just taped in place. And it looks like I was a little bit off of my strips. I got plenty up there, right? I mean, all kinds of stuff I got to cut off. Back here, just a wee bit short in a couple of them. So I've got to fit a couple more pieces in here, just 3 or 4 more little ones. And then we'll get this cut out. Not too bad. All right, so I got those extra pieces patched in where I needed to make sure I can cut this recess out. So just a couple little pieces here and there. That worked out just fine. I've got the line drawn on this side and around that side at this point. Just flip that template over and do one side then the other. So now we're ready to start cutting out the cockpit. You know, I will note here too, there's one thing it does not tell you in the directions, and it's what to do with these bulkheads at this point. You know, these two aren't going to be in the way. I don't think. I'll have to see once we get done. But, you know, as you're, let's look from the side here. As you cut this out, you know, you're scooping this like this, right? Well, right here, we're right up against a bulkhead. So I think that's going to be in the way, and that's going to have to come out to allow those pieces to go. You know, it's going to be a straight shot from here all the way across to here, straight line. And right now it's an arc. So those are going to have to go away a little bit. But I'm going to go ahead and cut the recess out first before I determine that. So cutting out this recess, you've got a couple options. You know, you can use a Japanese saw. These things work great. Mine, because of the thickness of the blade, it's not really great at making a curve. You know, you're going to have to come around this curve a little bit. And I'm not that great at using this saw. I'm still getting used to it. But this reciprocating saw, this multi-tool, that thing works really well. And I'm used to using it. And it cuts a really nice fine cut on there. And I can just plunge cut it without having to drill a hole or anything. So that is my tool of choice for this sort of work. So as you can see, the switch went out on my saw here a long time ago, so I just hot wired it. Gotta plug it in to make it work. So, that's pretty cool. That's really cool. I mean, that's just like awesome, perfectly opened up here. So yeah, as I was thinking, this one's going to be in the way when you string a line across here. It's going to be like that. So that one definitely has to come. This one sticks up a little bit. This one is fine, so I'm going to leave this one away. Not in the way, but in there. The other thing to note when you're cutting this out is keep that blade as much vertical as you can. I didn't all the way through, I almost did. A couple spots I've got to clean up. But you've got to sand this out, get it all smooth and fit anyway, so that will be what I'm up to next once I get these out of the way. The next step is to get these edges all squared up and smooth and ready for the next strips, because what you're going to do next is lay strips across here. You're going to start one at each end. You're going to use that center line it up here, same at the other end. But you want to make sure this is nice and smooth and square all the way around. So lots of sanding to get that ready. It's a nice thing about the cedar though, it's fairly soft. You can chew through it pretty quickly here. So I just went ahead and I just marked with a piece of tape the middle of the combing there, and I also marked the middle on here with a mark on it. That way I'll kind of keep this centered and lined up as I go. And I've just got a heat gun here. I'll turn that on and just kind of heat that one section up, see what happens here. You want to keep this moving so it doesn't burn. Not a huge deal if it burns a little bit, because you know it's going to be kind of hidden. You can sand it out, but you do want to keep it looking as nice as possible, right? You put all this work into it. Okay, starting to heat up nicely. Let's see if we can get it to bend. So I can hear it kind of complaining a little as it goes around this corner, but it is doing it. It didn't crack. There it did. All right. We'll have to try something else. Apparently that's not going to quite do it. Not enough heat or something, so I may end up having to steam it. We'll see. So concept was good. On the piece that didn't break, it did manage to hold its curve, so we could, bend it back into that space now, which was nice. But I think it's just too thick. So this was 3/16. I just ripped down a couple more pieces that are down to an 1/8 inch thick now. A lot more flexible. In fact, at this point, they will, I don't think I'll even have to heat them up to bend them in there. They'll just stay, so I could abandon doing the form. It'll work much better. The 1/8 inch strips still had a little more spring than I could get, if I just wanted to put it along here and tape it in there. It still had too much spring back on it. So what I ended up doing, I just clamped it on the form. I didn't even use any heat or anything this time, but you can see I've got both pieces just clamped on top of each other here. And I'm just gonna let those sit. I can't work on the boat at all tomorrow, so I'm gonna let those sit for a whole day and a half here. And by then, I think the wood will relax and take that shape very well. If you watched episode 2, I was contemplating what the pattern on the top of the boat was gonna look like, the stripes, all that kind of stuff. And I came up with like I wanna do like a turtle pattern on the top of there, trying to figure out how I wanna do that. If I wanna do, I mean, the coolest way is, right, a wood inlay. You actually cut it out and put it in there. That's the best. And I may still do that, but I was experimenting with a couple of other ideas here too. So I just took the part I had cut off the cockpit with, and I tried it. So I just masked this off real quick and did some stain. Stain obviously is not a good choice. I didn't think it would work, but I thought I'd try it because, you know, you gotta try everything. Then I tried just some spray paint. Spray paint works pretty well. You gotta make sure you don't get any bleed. You know, you got little spots here where it's gonna bleed a little bit, but not too bad. You could get a nice crisp line if you really smushed it down. So that worked pretty well. Fire, I mean, propane torch was awesome for that. So that worked really well. And then I also tried a wood burner iron on there as well, which also gave me kind of a cool effect. You can kind of see on here, there, little pattern right there, which is kind of neat too. So that's another option. I haven't really decided what I want to do yet, but I may end up doing the inlay just because it's the best. But anyway, I thought I'd try some ideas and see what it looked like. So I'll let you know what I decide on that. All right, I'm starting to get this trim put on here. I didn't start the video at the beginning of it because I was fighting with this stuff so bad. I didn't want to let go. It takes a lot of pressure to hold it here. But it looks like it might be actually working now. Yep. So what I'm doing is I'm taping a section of it and then putting glue on and then taping the next piece and just kind of working my way around. But at 1/8 of an inch thick, this would just barely bend. I still broke a piece up at the front, that really sharp corner, and it just broke again right there. So it doesn't really want to do all this, but it will if you talk it into it. It's going to be just several little pieces of this on here, I guess. That's okay, because you can just splice it together as you go. You won't really see it. You had to have a joint somewhere anyway. Okay, so this is sat overnight. The glue is set really nicely. Everything seems to be holding well. So that's good. So if you remember, I broke it right about, well, actually right there, you can kind of see it. So at that split, I put it back together again, threw some glue in there, and continued it around as far as I could go. So that's as long as that piece was. I still have just that front section to go. But it was this front section where it was really tough making this tight curve here. So I went back to trying to form it on this thing again. So last night I took it in, just put it on the stove. I put this last 6 inches or so in a steam bath on the stove and got that to bend, and it seems to work pretty darn well. So it springs back a little bit, but you can see it really held that curve nicely. So I think that'll work nice. I'll just splice it back into that other piece. Okay, so if I zoomed in a little bit here so you can see, it didn't make this bend, this part I had put on before, didn't quite make it right there. It's not very tight. You can see it touches nicely here. It's pretty good here. It'll work. But here it didn't come out. I put this piece of tape on here to actually prevent it from sticking past that center point, because that's where I thought I'd have my joint. I'm going to actually move the joint back a little bit right here. So I'm just going to pare this off a little bit, because this piece has a nice bend that'll fit right up in that front there. Once I bend that in there, it's kind of hard to get it like that, but it's kind of close to that. And that'll fit in there nicely. So I'm just going to pare that off right there a little bit. I've got it kind of roughly shaped close to what I need here. Just trying to get this angle just right. Sharpening this up a little bit. Okay, so I did a little more sanding right here, a little more shaping. Got this joint to fit up pretty darn nicely right here. So at this point, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna glue this little section here. I'm gonna stay shy of this next joint where we need to connect in there. But at this point, at least I can get up to that point and get that secured, get that taped into place. Looks like it's time to go to the hardware and get some more glue. How much glue are you going to use for this project? Well, so far, about one of these bottles got me this far, so this was brand new when I started. The hard part is getting this first piece lined up and get the glue or the tape to hold right away. It just wants to spring away from there. So put the first piece on and don't expect it to be your final, because you'll probably pull that back off and move it again a little bit. Enough pressure on there that usually holds it, at least keeps it tight up against there. You can see how this piece here too is twisted just a little bit, and I'll push that back with the tape here in a second. So by sticking it on the bottom, pushing, tightening on the top as we go, you can force that over. Never thought in woodworking I would be relying on tape this much. It's just one of those really weird things that just seems funny, but it works really well. There, you can see I was able to pull that over. Now that's nice and tight. Okay, still got glue down to about here, but I'm going to leave that right now until I get this piece fitted exactly how I want it. Actually, I'm going to put a piece of temporary tape up in here too to hold this just kind of in place for me. What that angle needs to be. There. short, so I'm just going to cut another little piece and stick it in there. And once you sand it, glue it, you will never see that at all. So I'll get this glued down first, and then I'll fix that little piece. So the next thing to do is just to make sure that this is flush with the top here. It's just a little proud. You want to make sure that that's the same height. That way when you put your new strips in going the other direction, that they will match up. So just trimming this off just a little bit. You can leave a little bit because it'll get sanded off later, but anywhere where you can feel it coming up with your thumb, just peel it down. All right, just a couple of things to note here before you start laying in your planks the other direction here is you're going to want to work from the back to the middle and from the front to the middle. And what you're going to do is you're going to lay it so that cove faces the middle of the boat or the middle of the cockpit. So, lay it in there like that so that cove is in there, and you'll work your way across, just like this, and then you'll eventually meet up with the pieces that are flipped over coming the other direction. And the reason you'll do that is when you'll end up with just a little slot right here that will have a cove this way, and it will have a cove this way. And you'll be able to trim a piece that will slide right in there. So just easier if you do it that way. Makes everything go nicely. So back at the back here again, it's the back of the cockpit. I'm going to put this piece in here like this. I'm going to make sure this edge is squared up. I'm going to put my square on here along the center line of the boat all the way down. Square this up, and then I'll scribe it underneath and cut that out, and that'll be my first piece. I'll do the same at the front. So that way I've got one here and one at the front. Theoretically, they are perfectly aligned with each other. By the time we get to the middle and get all those strips put in there, it's not going to be lined up anymore, but that's okay. That's why you fit that last piece in there. You'll make that custom, but to that point, it goes pretty quickly. Okay, so I've got that piece cut out. I went ahead also while I was in there, I marked that center line, so I'll be able to line it back up again. Otherwise, when you put this on here, you could get it just a little bit off, and then it wouldn't be parallel with that front piece anymore. So as you put this on here, this first piece is, because it's longer, and it's straight, and this part is curved, you're going to be, touching here, low here, touching here sort of thing, right? Because it's not going to fit exactly right. If you put it so it's touching at both ends and low in the middle, you're going to be sanding out so much material here that you'll probably wear right through it. Same with if you go, matching it to here, you're going to be so high here that you're too high. So kind of do it. You want to glue this in so you're about midpoint. You're still going to be sanding some of this. You're still going to be sanding some of this to get it smooth, but you'll get pretty darn close. And if you do that, then that next strip, because it's so narrow, it's not going as far as this one on this curve. It will just fill that in nicely, and you'll follow that scoop after this. So I've got the end of the last of these strips put in. As you do these little short guys, they don't require glue, I found. Well, not glue. They don't require tape. I was able to just hold them in place for, 15, 20 seconds, and that's enough to kind of lock them there. Move on to the next one. And I was able to do most of these like in an hour. They are tedious. Each one is being fit along this curve. Trying to fudge those in there, but it worked pretty well. I got down to this point though, and they only needed to be about 1/4 inch long down and getting tapered down to almost nothing right here. If we set this combing up on here, you can kind of see right along here, it's down to maybe 1/32 of an inch, if nothing. It might be down to 0, it looks like, as that slides in there. So to me, it wasn't worth putting all those little pieces this way. I put a couple strips a long ways instead, because like I said, I don't even know if you'll see that. By the time you put that the connector, that fillet of epoxy that fastens this in, I think that'll even just get all covered up. So it's kind of what it looks like right there, but it was a tedious process. This took several hours. So we're at the point now, the deck is really complete, just needs to be sanded and then fiberglassed. But as I'm pulling out these staples, I just thought I would mention. So the staples I used are 3/8 inch. Directions don't tell you what size staples to use. And I'll tell you what, 3/8 are marginal for the simple reason that you've got to drive them far enough where you kind of get these little divots. And those are sandable. I sanded them out last time. But where I was able to not bury them as much, like here, this one's a little better. You don't have that little divot. And so the staple still holds the wood in, but it doesn't have that little line on there. I don't know. I think I'd use 1/2 inch next time and see if they work better. So maybe that will help you out.